Sid, thank you for joining the webinar. Today we're looking at Excel with Excel. So the idea of this webinar was designed to show you some of the great shortcuts that you've got in Excel, but mostly to make sure that you understand the key principles of creating and understanding formulas. So I'm going to have a look at some shortcuts in Excel, which we'll come back to this presentation. But if I can go into my spreadsheet, and this with the little spreadsheet that we're going to start with, I'm just going to have a look at some shortcuts and things that you may have seen before but may not have seen before. It's always good to know. And I know that some of you here are just for a refresher while you're furloughed and something to do on an afternoon. So some of the automatic shortcut features, we'll have a look in this product sales. So just a little sales table that I've got here. There's some bits missing and I want to fill them in. First of all, I've got different salespeople, like Lee has been selling different products for different values, and I want to enter today's date in cell A4. So with A4 selected, I could type the date in, but dates are quite cumbersome to type in with all the slashes and the zeros to put in there. The keyboard shortcut for today's date is Control and semicolon, which is just next to L on your keyboard, and that will put in whatever date your computer thinks it is, so the 4th of May. As always with Excel, once you put some data in, accept it by pressing Enter or the tick on the formula bar or the Tab key. Now I want to put those dates in for everybody, and I could use Control semicolon all the way down or copy and paste, that would work absolutely fine. There's a feature in Excel called Autofill. Now, you may have used this before, not known what it's called, and it doesn't matter what it's called as long as you know how to use it. But it is important that you get your mouse in the right place. So with your mouse in a cell, you get like a chunky cross, and you would use that to select. If you put your mouse on a border of a cell, you get like a snowflake, which you would use to move the cell. But in the bottom right corner of the cell you have selected, there's a little square, which is called the autofill handle to get hold of. And if you put your mouse on there, your mouse looks like a small plus sign, which you can then use to drag down the list. And I'm just going to undo that a second, because Excel's really smart and it can see that the list finishes on row 13 by looking at the surrounding data. So if my list was a couple of 100 lines long, even clicking and dragging could be quite time consuming. So simply double clicking on the autofill handle has the same effect as dragging it down, and it will stop according to the surrounding cells. Now, Excel has decided to fill in a sequence of dates, so the 4th followed by the 5th and so on. And that's not exactly what I wanted. I wanted them all to be the 4th of May. Now, when Excel and some of the other Microsoft programs make an assumption about what you want to do, but there are possible other options, you get a little smart tag in Excel at the bottom of the range that you've filled in. It looks a little bit like Tetris. And if I hover over it, it says these are your options for autofill. So it's filled a sequence. If I have a look at the options in here, there are lots of things I could do. I could fill weekdays, skipping out the weekends, the 9th and 10th. What I actually wanted to do was copy the cells. And it's just so much of a time saver rather than copying and pasting or using Control semicolon all the way down. The smart tag's temporary, so it comes up immediately once you've filled the range. But if you continue to work, so if I just click on cell A1, the smart tag's still there. But as soon as I carry out my next action, like make the font color red, the smart tag disappears. Excel thinks, well, you didn't need it, otherwise you would have used it. So I'll disappear off. So that's autofill, which you can use to fill a range of cells and just have a look at those tags that Excel gives you. So the keyboard shortcut for today's date was Control semicolon, and then the autofill handle is where you drag and then use the options to switch the fill. Okay, let me go back into my spreadsheet because there's other things. If you were thinking that autofill was fantastic, you're going to absolutely love Flashfill. So Flashfill is like autofill on wheels. What I would like to do with my salespeople is I would like to sort them in alphabetical order by their surname. But Excel always sorts by the first character in a cell, and then the first two, the first three, and so on. So Alex is always going to come first, followed by Alice, which isn't what I wanted. So I'm going to just insert a new column. So I've just right-hand clicked on column C and insert a new column so I can have the surnames. It's going to be time consuming for me to type all those surnames, and this is where Flashfill comes in. So Flashfill will look at the data surrounding the cell that you're in, not just the cell that you're in. It'll look at the surrounding data and try and look for something logical that it can follow. So if I put Thomas, which is Lee's surname, find the autofill handle and either drag down or double click down. So it assumes that I want to copy the cells Thomas, Thomas, Thomas. Well, if I have a look at the autofill options and go for Flashfill, Excel has looked at the data in the surrounding cells and filled that in for me. Text to columns would do the same thing, but this is so much quicker. In actual fact, let me just delete that data. Without using autofill, Excel will give you hints as to guess, I think this is what you want as you're going along. So again, if I type Thomas in as a starting point, so Excel's looking at surrounding data to see if that's occurring. And then once I start typing Smith, I don't know if you can see on the screen there that it's given me sort of like a ghosted out, I think this is what you want. And it is exactly what I want. So all I have to do is press enter, and there we go. The data is then filled in, and it saves me a whole load of time. So I'm sure, look out for that Flashfill. I'm sure you could use that in your spreadsheets. So just go back to my presentation. So with Flashfill, you fill the data down and then look for the Flashfill options in autofill options. Just one last thing before we move on and have a look at some formulas. There's other tags that you see at the bottom of a range, and they're called the quick analysis tools. Now these appear automatically if you select a range, so 2 or more cells, that Excel can see a reason for analysing. So I've got a list of figures here in column E, and if I look down the numbers, I can see by reading the numbers which is the highest, and I can also see which is the lowest. But I'd like a bit more of a visual on that. Now, if I highlight these cells with numbers on, straight away, Excel can see a reason for analysing this data and displays the quick analysis tools. So from quick analysis, I would like to apply some formatting, and I think data bars is exactly what I want. So data bars gives me an in-cell indicator. The bigger the number, the bigger the bar. The smaller the number, the smaller the bar. And if any of the numbers change, so I'm going to change this 2 in E13, I'm going to change it to 25. As soon as I press enter, the bar gets a little bit bigger because the numbers increased. Now you could do that with data bars, but if I highlight those figures again, I know we're talking about formulas today, but if you're not very good with formulas, you could use the quick analysis tools and maybe from the totals tab, put yourself a quick analysis formula in. So just put an average in. So no need for you to understand what that formula is doing. You can just pick the data up. In actual fact, you can quickly create anything. So I've highlighted the data and the values, and I'm just going to quickly insert a chart, and I'll have a clustered column chart. And there we go. I've got the rest of the data, a little bit of formatting, maybe resize it a little bit. We'll make that nice and pretty. So those are just some quick tools for you. So with the quick analysis tools and with the formatting tools, autofill and flashfill. But what I really wanted today to focus on was the formulas and functions within Excel. So now we've had a look at some of the shortcuts, let's have a look at some calculations. On the screen, I've got the 4 main operators for putting calculations together. So we've got a plus symbol, add, minus, multiply, to subtract. Multiply is actually an asterisk. If you put an X in, Excel would think you're talking about the letter X and wouldn't know what to do with it. And then the divide is the forward slash, not the one that you would actually write if you were showing your workings out. So I'm just going to go back to my spreadsheet. I'm going to move to the basics worksheet, and we're just going to have a look at using those 4 formulas to calculate the spreadsheets that we've got here. I also want to show you different ways of putting formulas in. None of them are really right or wrong. It's personal choice a lot of the time. So I'm going to click here to see how much lunch costs. If I was working this out in my head, I've got an apple at 50p, plus a drink at 50p. So in my head, I've got £1, plus a sandwich at £2, which would give me a total of 3. So I'm going to be using the plus symbol for this particular formula. But all formulas in Excel start with equals, kind of opposite way around to a calculator. The equals at the beginning tells Excel I'm not just typing in this cell, I actually want you to calculate it for me. So to put the formula in, you can type numbers in. So I've got an apple at 50p, and then I'm going to type a plus. I've got a drink at 50p, plus I've got a sandwich at £2. As always, tick, tab or enter to accept the formula. And there we go, we get our total, and I get told that the answer is correct there for £3. I can see the formula on the formula bar, and the cell shows me the answer. So we've got the workings out and then the results. Now, while it's okay to put numbers in, it's not the best way to put a formula together. So if that sandwich actually cost me £3, my total's now wrong. That should have gone up to £4. But because I typed the numbers in manually, I'm going to have to click in the formula bar or double click in the cell to edit it and manually change that 2 to a 3. So that works, but it's really time consuming. And what if I was to forget to go and change the total? Now the answer's wrong. It's better if you can use cell references to put formulas together. And that's the idea of this grid system, column A, B, C, row 5, 6, 7. Oops, undo that. So I can see for shoe shopping, I've bought 4 pairs of shoes at £50 each. So I need to know how much I've spent. So I'm going to be using the multiple here. I still need to start with equals. And the number of pairs I've bought are in column B, row 12. So that would be cell B12. Times by, and the price per pair is in C12. And again, and enter to accept. Now, if I click on the formula bar there and click in the formula there and have a look at the formula bar, I can see that it's looking at whatever's in the cell. So it's not looking at each number, it's looking at whatever's in the cell at that point in time. It will give you an answer. So if I've now bought 5 pairs of shoes, with nothing else to do in lockdown, so shoe shopping's always a good thing to do. So 5 pairs of shoes at £50 per pair, immediately the total changes. Okay, so Johnny's got some pocket money. He starts out with £10, then take away 2 for the amount he spent on sweets, and take away another 3. He should be left with 5. So we first had a look at typing numbers in, and then typing cell references in. Now, typing cell references in itself can be quite time consuming. So that would be A19 minus B19. You don't have to worry about cell references. So again, if I type equals, all I need to know is that's where my value is. If I simply click on the cell, Excel will automatically type the cell reference in for me. So I don't need to worry about the column and the row. And from A19, I'm going to deduct how much I spent on sweets just by clicking in the cell and deduct the amount Johnny spent on a toy. Enter to accept. And again, it's using cell references. So if the figures change, the total will change immediately. One last way of including cell references in a formula. So for the lotto wins, Sue and I are in the lotto syndicate, and along with Sharon. So we have 3 people. We won £2,000. How much do we get each? So I'm going to type equals. And I suppose if you're at home working on a laptop and you haven't got a mouse, it might be easier just to press your up and down arrow keys, and you can go all around the houses until you land on the cell that you want to include. Then type the operator in, divide by, and again, use your arrow keys to go to the last cell. And once your formula is complete, just press enter. So that's had a look at the 4 different operators. and different ways of including numbers or cell references in a formula. Now there's a couple of worksheets here and this spreadsheet in blue that I'm not going to go through with you. So these are quite nice for you to have a practice on your own or share with a colleague or a family member who might want to have a practice too. I'm going to move on and have a look at some other formulas. In this example, and this often happens in Excel, I've got a table where I need to fill some formulas in column E. And the actual working out, the formula itself, is going to be exactly the same for each person. It's just looking at different cell references. So if Hannah's got 95 jelly babies and she doesn't like jelly babies, so she's going to share them equally between her 5 friends, how many jelly babies do they get each? So again, I'm going to start the formula off with equals and take the number of sweets divided by the number of friends. So quite a simple formula to put in there, and I'm just going to press enter. So 19, they get 19 each. So the formula was number of sweets divided by number of friends, and that's going to be the same. Sweets divided by friends, sweets divided by friends, all the way down. Excel has what's called relative cell referencing. So if I just double click in the formula for Hannah, or look at the formula bar, Hannah's data's on row 3. So for Hannah, we're looking at C3 divided by D3. It's going to be exactly the same for Lauren's, but C4 divided by D4, and then C5, D5, C6, D6, and so on through the spreadsheet. Relative cell referencing, as you saw with the dates earlier, I'll just put the date in again. As you drag it down, notice how it wants to drop it down a date at a time. So maybe if we were to fill this down, it would drop the number down a line at a time. It's exactly how it works. So either double click or drag down, whichever is your preference. And there we go, it's worked out the formula. So we had C3D3 for Hannah, and that's become relative to row 4 for Lawrence, C4D4. And then for Patricio, C5D5. For Yang, C6D6. And for Sven, C7D7. So you work out one, make sure it's right, and fill all the spreadsheet down. Let's have a look at how that would fill across. So we all know how this particular formula works. We start off with equals and we get some money coming in on a month, and then everybody wants a bit of it. So we need to deduct the mortgage, and then we need to deduct the pension and the insurance and everything else, and the cat food. So we have a long list that we're deducting, and all of those are in column B to work out the January figure. It's going to be exactly the same for February, but B should become C's, which should then become D's for March. So I'm going to accept this, take that formula and fill it across. By the way, I don't know, other than dragging, there's no double click to go across that you'd have to drag. So if we double check that, when I've filled across, the B's have become C's, and then the C's have become D's for March. Okay. So let's take this a step further. Our sales commission spreadsheet that we've put in, excuse me, with the formulas that we've seen so far, even that last one, the income one, where we had minus this, minus that, minus the other, they were all the same operator. They were all using minus. But what if you're using 2 or more different operators? What if you're using a plus and a subtract? What if you're using a divide and a plus? What if you're using a mixture of those? Here in this spreadsheet, I want to work out the subtotal. And Lee's been selling t-shirts at £7. Those t-shirts have then been discounted by £2. So in my head, 7 minus 2 gives me 5. And 2 of those were sold, so 5 times 2 should give me an answer of 10. So we know that. Bear in mind, we've got 10 now as the answer. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to start with equals the unit price minus the discount value times by the quantity sold. We should get 10, but we don't. We get 3. If you know why, give me a chat and just shout it out for me. If you've not come across this before, I'm just going to go through and go through it with you. So if you're using Ruth, fantastic brackets is missing. Thank you. You get the prize. And Florida's got the acronym as well. So if you're using multiple operators, there's a little acronym to help you remember the order of precedence. This is a little bit like your ABC for math. So with ABC, we know that A comes before X, because we learn that when we're 3, when our brains are sponges, but BODMAS, you learn it when you're a hormonal teenager and it doesn't stick. So what BODMAS stands for is brackets come first, ordinal second, divide, multiply, add, and subtract. So our formula was 7 minus 2 times 2, using cell references. So it doesn't matter how you type the formula in, what order you actually type the operator in. As soon as you press enter, Excel goes to its order of precedence and works it out this way. Is there anything in brackets? No. Any ordinals? No. Any divides? No. Any multiplies? Yes. Yes, there's a times there. We've got 2 times 2. So Excel would look at that and go, okay, well, I'll work out that 2 times 2 first, which gives me 4. Anything else in the formula? No adds. Yes, there's a subtract. So all it can do now is subtract the 4 that it's already worked out from the 7, which gives us the answer of 3. Hope that makes sense. So it doesn't matter how you put it in, Excel will always look down this order. So Ruth, well done. Ruth said we need to put brackets because brackets comes first and they're always done first. So if we bracketed off the 7 minus 2 and told Excel, do that first, so Excel goes, anything in brackets? Yeah, 7 minus 2, which gives us 5. And then 5 times 2 will give us the correct answer of 10. So please remember BODMAS, it's really important. And if you've got any kids doing GCSEs, they'll be screaming at the screen now saying, it's BIDMAS. It's not ordinals, it's indices, but it's the same thing. It's those symbols that you never use, like to the power of and square root of. So let's go back to our spreadsheet. Excuse me. And all that was missing was we need to tell it to do the 7 minus 2, D4 minus E4, before you times it by the quantity in F4. And we get the correct answer of 10. And again, they're just the relative cell references, so that formula can simply be filled down the spreadsheet. So if I just pick this one, it's become relative to row 9, and it's copied their formula precisely. Excuse me. Well, if there's a relative formula, there must be an opposite, what Excel calls absolute formulas, or fixed formulas, or something that's constant throughout the formula. So if I wanted to work out the sales commission for Lee, I'm going to do equals the subtotal that Lee's managed to bring in times by the 12% sales commission. Now, if I fill this formula down, G4 for Lee is going to become G5 for Chris, and then G6 for Alex, and G7 for Mel, and so on. And that's exactly what I want it to do. So G4 needs to be a relative cell reference. But the 12% is in H2. It's in H2, H2, H2. It's nowhere else in the spreadsheet. So when I fill the formula down, I don't want the H2 to change to H3 and then H4, because it will give me errors. In fact, let's have a look at the errors that we get. Okay, no way can 12% of £30 be 300,000. That can't be right. So let me undo that. Before I fill the formula down, I need to make it an absolute cell reference. So we looked at cell references as being just a column letter and a row number, exactly as it is. Absolute cell references need the inclusion of a dollar. Nothing to do with American dollar currency at all. It's almost like a code that Excel needs to tell it to fix that formula so when you drag it, it doesn't change. Because the cell is made up of two parts, the first dollar is fixing the A and the second dollar is fixing the 4. If at any point you want to put the dollars in manually, you do need to make sure that the dollar goes before the column and a dollar before the row. If you put the dollars in the wrong place, Excel's just going to come back and say, that doesn't work, there's an error. But thinking about it logically, I don't want to have to type the dollars in because I don't want to have to get it wrong. And if you look at your keyboard, to get a dollar, you'd need Shift and number 4. There's an F key that will put the dollars in for you, and they will be in the right place. So if you look at the F keys on your keyboard, well, it's Shift and number 4 to get a dollar in, so surely it's F4. So simply press your F4 key, that will put the dollars in, and they will be in the right place. Then when you fill the formula down, if I have a look at any of these formulas, the first cell reference, no dollars, that was relative, so that becomes relative to the next row and so on. But the H2, the dollars have made it constant, so they're all looking back at H2. G9 times H2, G12 times H2. If that value in H2 changes, I'm going to change it to 20%. As soon as I press enter, watch all these sales commissions change. Perfect. So absolute cell referencing is used to fix a cell reference in a formula. So our last topic today, we're going to have a look at fruit report and make this a little bit bigger on the screen. And I'm just going to start off by showing you where all of the formulas live within Excel. I'm sure you've all been in that position at work where somebody says, oh, you just need to use a VLOOKUP, or why don't you just use an if? And that's okay if you know those formulae and functions, but if you've never used them before, you need help really as to know where to start. So all the formulae and functions in Excel, on the formula bar, there's a little FX button to insert function. And this is where they all live. There's that many of them, they're organised into categories. So most recently used shows me the ones that I've used at this PC recently. If I change the category, if I have a look at lookup and reference, we're doing a session on Wednesday, I think, on VLOOKUPs. But if I change the category to all and have a look at some of the functions, there's like 400 and something functions in here, maybe more depending on the version of Excel that you're using. They're all written in the same way. So if I just click on this ACOSH function, for example, at the bottom of the list, Excel shows me to write this function, you'll need an equals, that's sort of a given. You type the function name, you then have a bracket. Inside the bracket, it's going to need a number, and then you're going to need to close the bracket at the end. Different functions need different arguments inside the brackets, different bits of information so that it can work it out for you. And Excel will tell you what the function does. So it returns the inverse hyperbolic cosine of a number. I have never ever needed that in my life, and I can't see me needing it ever going forward. So some of these functions are quite specific, but it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're counting sweets in a sweet shop or trying to work out a vaccine for COVID-19, you're going to want to add up a list of numbers at some point. And the sum function is the function that we're going to need for that. Now down at the bottom it says the equals sum and then open brackets, and then I just need numbers. That's all I need. That's all it needs from you. And it adds all the numbers in a range of cells. Now I haven't typed anything yet. All I did was click on FX. But can you see on the formula bar that Excel's automatically put the equals in for me if I'm going to use this to put a formula in? I'm going to go with that and say, yes, I'm going to put a sum function in this cell. And when I click OK, look at what Excel's done for me. It's typed in the sum, it's typed in the brackets. I don't need to worry about typing. All I need to know is about giving Excel numbers. So it says, what's the first number? Well, you could just choose one number, so F5, and then you could choose another number, and then you could choose another number, or you could even choose a range of numbers and another range of numbers, and you just go on and on and on all the way through. You get the subtotals at the right hand side and the grand total, the formula results at the bottom. That's how the formula looks, and I don't know if you can see each time I've changed tact or direction for numbers, they're separated with a comma, which is like add this and this and this and this. And when you're ready, just click OK. Perfect. So you can use the FX. You can also click on a cell with the sum function in, click FX, and maybe change some of these functions. Let's change that to 14 and click OK. Alternatively, you can type formulas in. So I'm just going to click at the bottom where we've got in cell B17. So I want to work out what the total is for apples. Always, always, always equals. Now, as soon as you type a letter after an equals, Excel's going to give you a list of functions that begin with that letter. So if I type an S, oh, there's lots that begin with an S. So if I type a U to home in on it, and click once on the sum function, just a single click, Excel tells me what that function does. Adds all the numbers in a range of cells. So just confirming, yes, that's exactly what I want. But it's only typed SU, so to finish off typing sum and to open the brackets, I'm going to double click on sum. Now that I've double clicked on sum, Excel stops telling me what the function does and instead is telling me what it needs next. So it's just saying, I just need numbers from you. You could type the range in, but I'm just going to put my mouse right in the middle of the first cell I want to add, click and drag down to the bottom cell. Excel types that in for me, B5 to B16. Where you have an open bracket, you need a closed bracket. I've got to be honest, if you don't close the bracket, Excel will anyway, so you could save yourself a fraction of a second there and enter to accept it. So there's nothing different about equals sum open brackets, close brackets at the end, what cells you want to include, either using the FX or typing the formula in yourself. It's a personal choice. But as I said, adding a list of numbers is really popular for anybody who's using Excel. So I'm just going to click at the bottom of oranges and have a look at the Home tab on the ribbon. There's an auto sum function here, and if I hover over it, it says it will automatically add numbers up for you. Well, that's even quicker than me typing it in. And you can see at the top of that tip, it says the keyboard shortcut for this is Alt and equals. Great. Well, I'm going to press auto sum, and Excel has done some guessing again. It says, well, I'll put the sum function in for you. I know that's right, because that's what auto sum does. I'm guessing you want to sum these up, and it's got marching ants around the range. You can use the corners a little bit like you do to adjust pictures, picture sizes, click and drag. But if you're happy with that, press enter. Whichever method you use, you really only need one formula, and then you can drag it all the way across. So we started with oranges, which was summing C5 to C16. As I've dragged it across to pears, that's become D5 to D16. Just to show you, I want to add in the totals for each month now, but just for you to be aware that Excel does guess things and it doesn't always guess right. So for January, I'm going to do auto sum. And it's guessed I want to sum B5 to G5, apples to peaches. And that's exactly right, so I'm just going to press enter. And yes, I could fill this down now, but I just wanted to show you to be careful. So for February, auto sum, and it's guessed B6 to G6, which is correct. But watch what happens now if I do auto sum for March. So the marching ants have tried to add up the numbers above as opposed to the numbers to the left. That's Excel's preference to add up and down as opposed to left and right. if Excel guesses wrong, all you have to do, just leave the marching ants there, that's fine. Put your mouse in the first figure that you need and click and drag across. So you're basically just saying, no, these ones please, not those ones, and then enter. There is a thing called a circular reference. So I've got a problem here again. So for April, I've put the formula in and it's dragging the cells above. So I'm going to redirect it. Now I should stop at G8 for April. But if I just accidentally drag too far, can you see how I've actually dragged to H8? Now H8 is the cell where the sum function is. So I'm basically asking Excel to add the total into the total. But we don't know what the total is yet to add the total into. And that's what creates a circular reference. So you're adding the total into a total, but we don't know what the total is. And on it goes. So if I press enter, a couple of things will happen. You get an error message on your screen. I don't think I've ever paused it long enough to read all of the words in that. I click OK. And I get a total of 0, which can't possibly be right. And on the status bar at the bottom of the screen, Excel tells me where that circular reference is. So circular reference, you just add in the total into the total. In other words, I dragged a bit too far. So I'm just going to delete that formula, again with auto sum, and drag, but make sure I don't drag too far. And yes, we can autofill, but I just wanted to show you about be careful that it doesn't always guess right, and also be careful about the circular reference. Now, even with dragging, let's have a look at this section here. Let's take those out. There's steps here involved. So one, I would click where I want the first answer to go. That's one move. Click auto sum. That's 2 moves. I'd check it and press enter. That's 3 moves. I'd go back to the cell, 4 moves, and drag it down or double click. And that's 5 moves. So 5 moves there, and 5 moves there would be 10 moves. It's got to be quicker than that, hasn't it? So if we delete these formulas out, and instead of doing one at a time, they're all the same formula all the way down. So if I just one move, highlight the empty cells where I want totals, and auto sum, 2 moves instead of 5. And if we take that and look at it as a bigger picture, so I'm going to take the totals out of the bottom, I'm going to this time highlight all the cells so there's no mistake in what I want to add up, and the empty cells at the right and the empty cells at the bottom. So I'm giving Excel a hint as to please fill the blanks in for me, those blanks and these blanks. And then, you guessed it, auto sum. So instead of 10 moves, we've got that down to 2. So sum functions, now we could have used that with our income. If I just go back to this cell here and have a look at how complicated that formula was, B4, B5, B6, B7. And it's very easy when you're doing a cell at a time to miss one out. So I'm going to take away those formulas and start off with B3. So that's my 2000. Now all of these figures that I'm wanting to deduct from my income, they all sum up, it shows me on the status bar, to 1,318. So if I was to go back to this formula and instead of doing equals B3 minus B4 minus B5 minus B6, if I just asked it to minus or deduct the sum of all those outgoings, the formula's neater because it's looking at a range. I haven't missed a cell and the answer's correct. So have a look at the formulas and see which one you think is easiest to read. So if this was somebody else's spreadsheet, which one would you find easier? The one using the sum or the one using the individual cells? No right or wrong, it's a personal choice. Going back to my fruit report then, we use the sum function to add up a list of numbers. We've also got a table here to find an average of the numbers and the minimum and the max and the count. All of these are statistical functions, excuse me, and they're all written in the same way as a sum function. So with the sum function, we had sum, open brackets, range, and close brackets. The average function is exactly the same, just a different word at the beginning. So I could type in here equals average, but shortcuts for you. I'm not going to press the auto sum button, but I am going to use the drop down arrow on it to see what else we have in here. And I can see here we've got an average function. So that's going to save me typing. But again, be careful about the correct range. So Excel wants to select from B5, which is correct, but right down to B18, which is incorrect. It should stop at B16, because an average is the total divided by the number of figures that make up that total. So really, I only wanted an average of the actual figures, not including the total. So again, with your mouse, just selecting the correct range and press enter. Minimum, if you're wanting to know what's the smallest figure out of a range of cells, you could look down the figures manually, 256 so far, another 256. The 256 is my minimum. And if you had to do that for each month, that's really time consuming. So to use those functions, you click in the cell where you want the formula to go. Use the drop down arrow next to auto sum. Don't press auto sum, make sure you use the arrow. Okay, so I'm looking for a minimum, so min must be the function that I'm looking for. Again, Excel's guessed it wrong, it's not a problem. I want to find a minimum of those numbers. So opposite to min, I want to find the highest number, so manually 5626, 5626. So I can find that out myself, or I can click in the cell where I want the formula to go, auto sum. So it's not maximum, it's just max. Excel's guessed the wrong cells, it's not a problem. I just select the right ones. And for count, how many cells have numbers in them? There's 1, 2, 3, well there's 12 months, isn't there? So I'm not going to count them all down. So there should be 12 cells with numbers in them. So click where the formula is going to go, drop down arrow and auto sum, count numbers, and it's those ones I want to count. And that gives me an answer of 12. So a little table, rather than fill in the average and then the minimum and the max and the count, I'm going to highlight all 4 of these statistical values and auto fill them across, and I get answers for each one. As the figures change, depending on what you change, the total, the average, the min, the max should change. So if I make this £1, it will become my minimum value and it will change the average and the total. So I'm just going to change that to 1. That's changed, and that's changed. Similarly, if that's going to change to 5,000, then the total, the average, and the maximum this time is going to change. Ooh, it's that big it can't even read it. So hover over it, I can see it's gone up quite a bit. And just change the column width so that the number fits. A cell that's empty, if I press delete here, gives me a count of 11. So that's quite a good check. If you've got lots and lots of rows of data and you should have, I don't know, 375 figures in each one, you've got one that says 374, you know that there's something missing, maybe go back and check it. Pressing delete will clear the value in a cell, but please remember that 0 is in actual fact a figure. So that now goes back up to 12. So I think for today's lesson, that brings us to a close. I hope you've learnt some shortcuts there and understand a little bit more about formulae and functions. Please have a play around with this spreadsheet, in particular the blue sheets that we haven't played with. See if you can complete those. And hopefully you'll go away now and maybe have a look at your spreadsheets that you've got, and instead of using your calculator, throw that away and have a go at automating formulas and functions. So thank you for joining. Has anybody got any questions before I close the webinar? While I'm waiting for questions, there is a survey when I end this webinar. There will be a quick survey if you wouldn't mind filling that in for us. There doesn't seem to be any questions coming forward. So it just leaves for me to say thank you. Thank you for your time. I hope you found it useful. Stay safe and hope to see you on another webinar. Thanks very much. Bye.